Hello, welcome into the weigh-in presented by the FanDuel Sportsbook. I'm your host today, Brendan Glasheen, joined by Action Network senior editor Dan Stupp, and of course joined by our former MMA fighter, Action Network MMA analyst Billy Ward. We are breaking down the biggest fights of UFC 288. We'll dish out some best bets. We'll sift through some of the key fights we are targeting, some underdogs, some props, and we even have a parlay for you at the end of today's show. 5 fights on the main card, 7 prelims. It all goes down this weekend at the Prudential Center in New Jersey. The blockbuster event gets started at 6:30. Prelims are at 8 Eastern, main card at 10 Eastern on pay-per-view. As I said before, the weigh-in is presented by our friends at FanDuel, and FanDuel has an exclusive offer for our new users. Just go to FanDuel and sign up to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet your first $5. It's as simple as that. Guys, we'll begin with the main event, the Bantamweight Championship. Aljamain Sterling, he makes his return home. He's a slight dog to Henry Cejudo. He's at minus 115 over at FanDuel as of this morning. Billy, it's a homecoming for Sterling. He's very chipper and outspoken. No surprises there. He is very confident about his ability and what he can do in this main event. How do you want to bet this main event? And your thoughts on Sterling being very mouthy early on?
Yeah, definitely two of the more annoying fighters on the microphone meeting, Aljamain Sterling and Henry Cejudo. I really enjoy watching both of them fight. I'm really not a fan of listening to either of them speak, but fortunately, you don't have to do that part after the fight. No, it's a great fight. We have, the current champion against a former champion who never lost the belt in the cage. Cejudo retired, quote unquote. I don't know how much he really wanted to be done or wanted to negotiate a better contract, but either way, he's returning at 135 where he last held the belt before leaving. It should be a close fight. The betting odds paint the picture. Sterling is the much bigger, taller, longer fighter. He's got about 3 inches on height and reach. But Henry Cejudo is an, Olympic gold medalist in wrestling and really came along with his striking later in his UFC career. So it makes it tough to break down because Sterling's best attribute is probably his grappling, but he won't be able to get Cejudo down unless Cejudo wants to make this a grappling match. So, I try to look at my 3 phases of MMA between the striking, the grappling, and wrestling. Pretty clear case. I think that Sterling's better in 2 of them, but Cejudo is so much better in the one he's better at, which does make it close. So I really think these lines are pretty sharp. It's moved around a little bit with Cejudo and Sterling flipping who's favored. But I think the line's about right if Cejudo hadn't had a 3-year layoff and is coming back at age 36. So whatever percentage chance you want to assign that Cejudo's a step slower or the time away is caught up to him or he just doesn't have it anymore, that's about the edge on the Sterling side in my eyes. So minus 105, I like the money line. If you wanted to make it real juicy, I think it probably goes long. I don't see a quick finish for either man here, but minus 105 is a fair enough price for me that I'm not going to get fancy.
Sterling is from Uniondale. Very excited about this homecoming, Dan. And as Billy mentioned, he's a very highly touted grappler. On the other side, you've got the concerns about the age, the layoff for Cejudo, who is a decorated wrestler. How do you see this one playing out, the main event?
Yeah, no, I think Billy broke it down pretty well. The big question mark is what the time away has done either for or against Cejudo. I don't think it's done anything great for him. And we've seen the improvements that Sterling's made over the past few years, kind of during this run. I think he's really kind of primed for this fight to take advantage of a guy who's been out of the cage for a while. And we were talking about it earlier. Again, you don't want to read too much in the stats and trends and stuff like that. But, fighters who are 35 or older, 2-28 in UFC title fights at 170 pounds or lighter. So the lighter weight classes, the older you get, the less success you have in UFC title fights. Even the guy who won those 2 fights was 170 pounder. So again, not a huge sample size, but I think it really underscores the, just any drop off in chin or cardio or anything like that as you start to age, which is, going to happen as you age. It's just more strikes against you. So add that on to the layoff and other concerns with Billy. I really like Sterling. I think we're getting a pretty good price on him.
How about our favorite underdogs on this card? As I mentioned before, we've got 5 fights on the main card, 7 prelims. Billy, and by the way, you can find Billy Ward's luck ratings available in the Action Network app, actionnetwork.com. He's got most of the main fights broken down. He considers Sterling and Cejudo to be fairly valued, and he sees an edge clearly in taking Sterling as a slight dog. But when we look at underdogs, not a ton of lopsided lines here. So where are you seeing value?
Yeah, one of my least favorite underdog cards in a while, but we had a little bit of drama at weigh-ins that I think actually made this case a little bit stronger for me. I'm going with Joseph Holmes. He was the one who missed weight. I believe he came in at 189, which is 3 pounds over the middleweight limit for his fight against Claudio Ribeiro. But the market's overreacted because we're getting 20-25 cents of value on that just based on him missing weight. We've talked about it on the show before, but it's a minuscule impact on the eventual winner if you miss weight. It's really not as much as this price is baking in. And, I think there's a lot going for him. He's 3 or 4 inches in height and reach on Claudio Ribeiro. It should be a mostly striking fight, but if anyone's going to get a takedown, it's Holmes. So that's kind of, 2 out of those 3 there. And Ribeiro is 0-1 in the UFC, and the guys he fought before the UFC are just a super low level of competition. So that doesn't mean he can't beat anyone who's a UFC quality fighter, but it certainly means we haven't seen him do it yet. So when you can get, significant plus money coming back against a guy who hasn't proven it at this level, I'm going to take that. Not a huge bet for me, don't go crazy, but a little bit of sprinkle at plus 160 on Joseph Holmes.
Dan, we're grinding and finding here for this UFC 288 main card, or perhaps a prelim. Where do you find value? Your favorite underdog?
I think grinding's the key word here. It's a pretty chalky card for me. But one I don't even want to say I like it, but I'll probably end up betting it, is Chrome Gracie in the pay-per-view opener. He's been out of the cage for 3.5 years, but he's fighting Charles Jourdain. A very good fighter, but a very kind of flawed fighter in some respect. His takedown defense is less than 50%. And I think a guy like Gracie, who has just next level jiu-jitsu, he really probably only needs 1 takedown to get the finish. He didn't look real great, 3.5 years ago when we saw him fighting Cub Swanson. But honestly, I think that's why we're getting a pretty decent price on him now at about plus 150. So I think that's definitely worth a sprinkle. And honestly, I think if he wins, it's going to be, via sub. I think his sub's about plus 225 and the inside the distance about plus 200. So there's a variety of ways to play a guy who's coming back from a long layoff, but should have a really distinct edge and a really important part of the fight.
All right, there you go. So there's the value you can find for UFC 288. On to our favorite fight of the night. We've got Gilbert Burns and Bilal Muhammad. This one's also a fun one to pick apart. You've got Muhammad, guys, coming in here unbeaten in his past 9 fights. Strong case for a title shot, but now you've got this fight now being a 5-rounder, and there's a potential edge for Burns if he takes care of business. Looking at the money line prices for this one, Burns at minus 130, Muhammad plus 106. For Burns, Billy, a finish here would go a long way. Why do you support backing Burns for this one?
I mean, to be honest, whoever wins this fight very much deserves the next title fight, even if it's not a great fight. Burns has beat everyone he's fought in a similar time frame, except for former champ Kamaru Usman and Khamzat Chimaev. And he took Khamzat to a very close decision that easily could have gone his way. Khamzat, up until that point, never even made it out of the first round against anyone. He's just demolished everyone other than Gilbert Burns. So, and as you pointed out, Muhammad on the 9-fight win streak, these are clearly, I think, at this point, the second and third best welterweights after champ Leon Edwards right now. But it's an interesting one to break down because not only is it a rare 5-round fight that's not a title fight, but it's also a fight that came together on less than 2 weeks' notice. The original co-main event got scrapped. These guys stepped up. They wanted to stay active. They wanted to make their title case. And that cardio is going to be a really important factor. We talked about it. We've seen Gilbert Burns is his 3rd fight already this year. Didn't really take a ton of damage in those. And that can be a double-edged sword, right? He could be tired. He could have peaked too many times, and that could work against him. Or if he stayed in shape throughout this whole period, he might be in a really good position to go 5 rounds. Bilal Muhammad hasn't fought since last October. He's coming off Ramadan. He's a Muslim. That might have impacted his training schedule. I think there's more questions about Muhammad's cardio and an ability to last if this fight does go longer. So for that reason, I'm taking the FanDuel bet. It's Gilbert Burns in rounds 4, rounds 5, or by decision. You can get all of those rolled together at plus 200.
And as Billy wrote on his luck ratings piece, Burns undervalued at minus 130. Is there still potential to wait on that line, or is 130 a price? If you were to play the money line, is that a price you want to go get now?
Yeah, I was originally just going to play the money line on this, but both guys are just so durable. I don't really see a reason to bet the money line. It would be very surprising to me if either of them got finished early. You might not have to go as much as 4-5 decision, but Burns an over 1.5, something like that. I think the line's about where it's going to be. This was one of the earlier fights the books put up, so it's probably pretty settled in compared to some of the prelim fights. But, if I had to take a money line sign, I think I'd still go Burns, even at minus 130. I just don't really see him putting Muhammad away. Nobody's finished Bilal Muhammad in many, many years, so I don't see that changing, at least not in the early rounds.
Burns on record this week. I can get a finish. If I want to solidify myself as a number one contender, I've got to take this guy out. Dan, when you look at Burns, and as Billy said, he's been in action quite a bit this calendar year. Is there potential for Muhammad to cause a little bit of frustration?
Yeah, Billy had mentioned kind of can be a double-edged sword kind of with the schedule that Burns has been keeping, kind of the peaking, the highs, of getting up for weigh-ins and fight camps and press conferences kind of over and over. I think whatever Muhammad's kind of dealing with as far as his layoff and fairly short notice fight, I kind of feel like those cancel out. Sometimes that layoff can be a good thing. You work on new skills. And we saw Bilal before, his most recent fights. He's looked fantastic. I actually kind of like this fight the same way Billy does, except I think it's Bilal who eventually pulls ahead as the fight goes on. Kind of the same bet. I like him on the money line. I think he's going to wear down Burns early with his much improved takedown defense. I think he can pepper him with shots. I think he can eventually tire Burns out. Again, that's not an easy thing to do, but like Billy said, I think there's a lot of durability here. So I like Muhammad on the money line, but I also like the same play Billy did, except round 4, round 5, round decision. It doesn't pay quite as much as plus 170, but like you said, with the durability of these guys, I think it either goes to decision or at least makes it to those non-championship championship rounds.
More on Burns and Muhammad later on in our parlay for UFC 288. Shifting gears, victory predictory, our favorite props, chances for some really nice plus money if you surf around the FanDuel Sportsbook. Plenty of choices in the prop market. Billy, what caught your eye?
Yeah, I'm looking at the lone heavyweight fight on this card, and this is the other heavyweight division, as we like to say, which they're not the guys who are great athletes and going to contend for titles. It's the guys who probably wouldn't have a job in the UFC if they were fighting at a lighter weight class, but we just don't have enough big guys. And that's Braxton Smith versus Parker Porter. Braxton Smith, really weird record. He made his pro debut in 2014 against future UFC vet Chase Sherman. Disappeared, just fell off the face of the earth for 8 years. No boxing, no kickboxing, nothing. Comes back last May, rattles off 5 straight first-round knockouts against horrible competition, don't get me wrong, and then gets his ticket to the UFC. He's fighting Parker Porter. Porter's 3-3 in the UFC. He has 3 wins by decision and 3 losses in the first round. He's weird for a heavyweight because he doesn't have a ton of power, but he has shockingly good cardio for his physique and just a ton of volume and output. So this is a super binary fight to me. It's either Smith is going to finish him right away, or we're going to have a horrible, boring, sloppy heavyweight fight where Parker Porter jabs him to death for 15 minutes. So those are the choices. Dan's going to make the case. We see it the same way. It's just which way. And I should mention the odds. Braxton Smith by KO in round 1 is plus 340.
Yeah, so Dan, same fight caught your attention, but as Billy said, you're going to go in a little bit of a different direction.
Just the other side of that binary situation we have here. I'm taking Porter via decision. I think he's been in the UFC long enough to see kind of these 1 round, KO guys, and he's got knocked out a few times. He survived some. If he gets through that first round, like Billy said, he's got the durability, the car is shockingly good cardio for sloppy heavyweight. I think he can just ride out this decision. So basically, if he gets out of the first round, I think it goes to a decision. And Parker Porter by decision pays 7-1 plus 700. So I'm very happy with that prop.
My own quick rebuttal. I said my quick rebuttal to Dan's side. I think the best way to play it on the Porter side is to wait for after round 1 and then go live, because you remove the risk of him getting starched in round 1. It doesn't necessarily mean you'll get just as good of an odds. So there's a trade-off there. If you're hunting for the biggest odds, Dan's bet's the way to go. But I'm almost certainly going to bet Porter live after round 1, assuming he goes to even or plus money. And that way you're kind of covered on both sides of it.
Braxton Smith to win in round 1 is plus 290 over at FanDuel. The money line odds for this fight, Smith Porter, Smith at plus 138, Porter at minus 170. Interesting. We go to the prop market. These guys are on the same fight, but going in different directions. Okay, we close out. Well, we got the parlay, but our final single bets here on the way in for UFC 288. Our last bet, our best bet, Billy. What do you got?
Yeah, this is a fight I broke down in a longer form on the Action Network, but I'm looking at Drew Dober by KO -110. He's fighting Matt Frivola, two guys, no interest in defense, no interest in preserving themselves, not a ton of interest in grappling from either man. They're going to stand and trade. I think Dober is a considerable better athlete here than Matt Frivola. Both guys have big power, but the biggest factor, Dober's never been knocked out. I was looking up his record when I wrote the article. I was shocked to find that out. I would have swore he's been knocked out at least once or twice. Frivola, on the other hand, has been knocked out twice fairly quickly, including against Terrence McKinney, who Dober beat. And he seemingly gets hurt just every single fight. And I don't think that's a good strategy against a guy like Dober, who's going to come out super aggressively, kill or be killed. If you wanted to play the safe, fight to end in knockout is, I would say, almost a guarantee here, but you're getting odds that reflect that. So the Dober side -110, pretty much most of his win condition is on a knockout. So we'll go with that rather than the money line.
And Dan, your best bet for UFC 288.
I'm going a very similar route. I'm going with another guy who should come out very strong and very quickly, and Chaos Williams. Go figure with his name. But he's fighting a guy I don't think is really on his level. Bedoya, I watched a little of his footage. He seems to really like low kicks. I think against a guy like Chaos Williams, it really doesn't matter what you throw at him. Eventually, he's going to counter you. He's just so quick. I think against an opponent like this, and the confidence he's had and some UFC wins under his belt now, I think he's just going to blitz from the opening bell and put this one out quickly. So Chaos Williams by KO -120. I would even look at maybe some first round stoppage props there too.
Any reason why you might not want to go submission on this?
I mean, there's always the concern of kind of the pound and or the what's the term I'm thinking of? What's that? Club and sub. That's the one I'm thinking of, where they just beat him so badly, you might as well take the easy choke. But I think Chaos Williams just loves the style on guys. So I'm okay going with strictly KO instead of inside the distance.
Okay. Our producer, Charlie DeSturco, who I'll shout out at the conclusion of this program, would appreciate the follow-up question, just to be sure that we know exactly what is in the mind of Dan Stubb for this particular card. Okay, before we go, I'll hand it over to Billy. The parlay that we're going to give out, you can put this together over at FanDuel. We'll give the total odds at the end. But it consists, Billy, of most of the picks from this show. So give it to us. What do you got for a parlay for UFC 288?
Yeah, the first leg, we're going with Burns and Muhammad to end in round 4 or 5 or by decision. Just taking the best of both worlds from how Dan and I see the fight. This way, as long as it hits the 4th round, that leg cashes, no problem. Then we're going with my Drew Dober by knockout -110. Just talked about that one. And then Dan's Chaos Williams. This time we're going to add submission into the parlay just because it would be heartbreaking for Club and Sub to destroy, almost plus 400 odds parlay. Shout out to Murcielago MMA and those guys who are going to be in Chaos Williams' corner. Big time component of the Michigan MMA scene here. So I'm excited to see Chaos.
All right. Well, it makes sense, too. We're staying away from Porter and Smith because of the differing opinions. Dan, anything to offer here on the parlay in terms of any other insight?
No, I think he nailed it. Billy and I have been kind of talking a lot about the card this week, and I know we're both really big on Dober by KO. I was a little mad that he took that as his best bet because that was going to be mine. But no, that's thankfully you don't have to pay for the pay-per-view for that one. That one's free. So make sure you check that one out, 9:30 p.m. That's such a great fight.
Total odds come out to plus 368 for this UFC 288 parlay. Here's the recap for the picks. We'll start with Dan. Dan's on Sterling moneyline, Kron Gracie moneyline, Muhammad moneyline, and he's also got Muhammad round 4, 5 decision, one of those 3. Porter by decision, and Chaos Williams by KO, TKO. Billy's also on Sterling. He likes Holmes on the moneyline, Gilbert Burns round 4, 5 or decision, Braxton Smith by round 1 KO, and Drew Dober at KO, TKO. FanDuel has an exclusive offer for new users. All you have to do is go to FanDuel and sign up to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet your first $5. So again, sign up. You get $150 in bonus bets when you bet your first $5. Folks, make sure you tune into the fights tomorrow starting at 8, the prelims, pay-per-view at 10 to see how your picks play out. And of course, stay up to date in the Action Network app where you can find, watch, and track picks and bets that you like at the same time. For Billy Ward, Dan Stupp, our producer today, Charlie DeSturco, our hardworking Action Network video team behind the scenes, Brendan Glasheen, thanks for tuning into the weigh-in. Best of luck and enjoy the card.